But I think that maybe one point of confusion is that the IRS is a separate part of our government from Homeland Security that deals with all the immigration issues. So there may be some information that the Michigan employers, are obligated to send to the IRS to show, the payroll taxes are being taken care of and all of that stuff. And then that's a separate question from whether or not, folks have, 100% documentation of their lawful permanent resident status or work visa status and so on and so forth. So the IRS is not really trading information with other parts of the federal government who are not that efficient, actually. So, okay.
And the second question concerns the ICE poll, back to the
Mhm.
ICE poll, just 48 hours.
Mhm.
I believe I read that there's I think it was a federal court case in Wisconsin where a judge held that a municipality could be liable for violating a person's civil rights if he held for 48 hours, and that the person you were voting hadn't been charged and didn't have an opportunity to be heard before a judge or magistrate. Is that true?
Yes, it is true that there is a court case. That's what I was referencing when I mentioned that there is some dispute about the constitutionality of the enforcement of ICE holds. But again, that's one case in a state court in one particular state. It's not an issue that has actually been ruled on by the Supreme Court or even any of the federal courts, to my knowledge. So that particular ruling may provide fodder for future court decisions, but it's not really, it doesn't automatically follow that that's going to be the law of the land. That issue is very much open.
It was a state court that made a state.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, would you also look on the back page of the green sheet if you received one? This chronology was compiled for our 2012 study, but the last entry, excuse me, is for February 27, 2018, and a ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that undocumented immigrants can be detained indefinitely, and that people held in immigration detention, sometimes for years, are not entitled to periodic hearings to decide whether they may be released on bail. The last word we know on that.
One more question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
She says I get one question.
Okay.
Marcelo, you mentioned that undocumented and green card have certain rights. And one of those rights, though, is not for a phone call. And one of those rights is not to be represented by an attorney if you cannot afford an attorney.
It's usually possible to do a phone call after you've been detained. As to whether or not you would have a right to an attorney, the Constitution basically says that you have a right to an attorney in a criminal case, but the enforcement of our immigration laws is usually not criminal. It's a civil violation. So that's correct. You're not entitled, unlike if you get arrested for violating state law, and in that case, if you cannot afford an attorney, you have the right to one. That's definitely not the case with immigration cases.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've made good use of our panelists, and we heartily thank all three of you for coming to share your insights and your experience.
Thank you.
Now, our next step is a solution, and as I said, there are 4 bills on immigration reform now in Congress. We plan to do an immigration reform program in the fall if we need to speed that up so we can all get up to speed on what's happening. We'll do that sooner, but thank you all for coming, and we're going to look for a solution on this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.